All right, so section 3, right?
Section 3.
You did a good job with that one.
Thank you.
Yeah, that was excellent. Brain expanding stuff.
Right. Section 3, though,
Section 3.
let's take a break. Ready? We're gonna list 10 albums that changed our lives as teenagers.
Okay.
This one's been going around Facebook a lot. I've had to do 2 of them now. I feel compelled to do this. So, what we're gonna do 1, 2. We're gonna do 1, then 2, and then 3. We'll go around the room for each one. Ready?
Okay.
I mean, fair warning, I've got 3 or 4, like, immediately. 10 may be a struggle to get to, but let's see how far we can go.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Fair enough.
So really, the first one for me would be listener supported, Dave Matthews Band, which I own it.
Okay.
I love that album. It's a good album. It was a live album, and Dave Matthews Band was excellent. And you guys can leave comments if you disagree. That's fine. But I think it's really quite good. I know Dave. But I will say this, of the entire history of the catalog that Dave Matthews has been recording, that is the finest moment, is that live show in New Jersey, recorded on 9/11/1999, or 2000. Correct me on the count. I just remember it was recorded on September 11, a year or two before 9/11 happened. Anyway, that's number 1. What's your first?
You know, I really wanted Pet Sounds to be my first.
There you go. Pet
But
Sounds.
no, it's not.
What is it?
Because Pet Sounds I was introduced to at age 9.
Ah,
So that was like the album that influenced my childhood.
Gotcha.
You know, not my teens. So the first one I'm going with for my teens is going to be Weezer's Blue Album.
Blue Album. Blue Album's a good album. It's my favorite of the Weezer albums. That's right.
You haven't listened to most of the Weezer albums. I don't want to hear it.
It's all kind of samey.
That face, I know that.
I know that face. Listen.
Because I've given that face to so many people when they throw that accusation at music.
No,
Ally.
it's fine.
And-
I buy you the albums,
Yes.
right? I buy the albums. I just don't. Rivers Cuomo isn't my cup of tea. He does good stuff. I really loved his home recordings.
You know?
That home recordings of he did the home studio stuff. His demos. They did a couple compilations of those. Those are awesome and fun. But yeah, the big produced Weezer records, I'm like, I like the Blue Album. That's the one I like. I've listened to the Green Album and Pinkerton and the Red Album. How many others are there? The Maladroit?
Maladroit, Ratitude,
Oh,
the
I hated
White
it.
Album.
Yeah.
You haven't listened to the White Album yet, I know that.
Well, I got it for you for Christmas.
Yes.
So, like, I'm familiar with their work. Not my cup of tea. But yes, it was. I remember learning songs off of that one, and then Girls Never Cared. And then she came along, and she didn't. She cared. Anyway.
Yeah.
All right,
It's your first.
So mine is Metallica Ride the Lightning.
Oh, Ride the Lightning is probably Metallica's.
Now,
Yeah.
I personally I don't care much for it out of their discography now, because my tastes have changed quite a bit, but
That was still with Cliff Burton?
I was raised on my parents' music, because I had a very sheltered childhood. So
Right.
ages like 1 through 10 was Elvis and Neil Diamond, Conway Twitty, and the New Christy Minstrels, all of which are fine musicians.
Yes?
However, bought a present for a friend of mine. I knew he was a Metallica fan, even though I couldn't pronounce it and didn't know what it was. And I went to the store and I bought this tape, and it had that cover art for Ride the Lightning, which is quite excellent. And I was like, that looks pretty cool. Bought him that. And it was like weeks until I was supposed to give it to him, because it was like, Christmas, and this was early, and it was one of those sits on a shelf in the closet for months, and I'm like, it's not doing anybody good in there, so I decided I'd give it a listen, and my life changed forever.
That's awesome. Yeah, Ride the Lightning is a good one. I really got introduced to Metallica on And Justice for All.
Which is excellent.
Yeah.
I'm the rare fan that actually really likes their later stuff. I was one of the few fans that loved Load. I thought there was quality stuff there. I liked Unforgiven 3, and everybody else was like nuts, but I enjoyed it. You know.
Hey, everybody. That's why that's what's
I'm
great
actually
about
a
this.
huge fan of Saint Anger. I think that's their most underrated album. So
That was the one where they had the no. Saint Anger was the one where the mastering was all fucked. Yeah. Oh.
It was
Sorry.
the first one with their new drummer.
Screwed up. Yeah.
Hey, it wasn't me this time.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't you this time. Don't repeat after me, kids. Yeah. I don't know. I like Metallica a lot, but I'm not the super fan. I don't have the energy for it. That is some in your face, and it's hard to not move while listening to them.
That is true.
Which is really the goal of any musician, right?
Right.
But yeah, that's no, I love And Justice for All. But that was like their big orchestral one. You know, well then they did the live orchestra thing.
So what's your number 2?
My number 2. My number 2 is gonna probably be Jagged Little Pill.
Really?
Yeah. I love the crap out of that album.
See, everybody I knew that had that album, or that actually liked that album, kept telling me that it was really good if you were high, but that was about it.
Oh, that's not true. It's nuanced. The musicianship on it is excellent. I don't know. Yours?
Mine is actually going to be Rancid. Out Come the Wolves.
Yeah, it's a good one. Rancid's awesome. You?
I'm gonna go with Danny Elfman's original Batman soundtrack.
Ah, Batman's pretty good.
Okay.
Because I still think between that and Beetlejuice, I think those are his two best scores. But I think the music to his original Batman, his theme music and a couple of tracks, he's the only guy who has that John Williams touch of just that theme is so instantly resonant. Like it makes the hairs stand up on the back of my neck. Like Batman was a hugely influential movie for me, and that soundtrack was my gateway into, classical music. I hadn't really listened to classical music before, or just pure instrumental or orchestral stuff. And that paired with Ride the Lightning, because my two musical obsessions are orchestral and heavy metal. And those are two fairly distinct branches that I discovered both age 10, and Ride the Lightning went one way and the Batman soundtrack went the other.
That makes sense. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I'm doing 3.
3.
3 would probably be Bitches Brew, Miles Davis. That one changed it all for me. It's a polarizing record. I don't know that there's a more polarizing record than it in the jazz world, but it's excellent. And I've been trying to sound. I would love. Especially my early stuff, the Nuclear Powered Winnebago stuff. I was really trying to sound like that. And now I've kind of found my own voice, but yeah, it's excellent. You?
I think number 3 for me would probably be Real Big Fish.
Which one?
Turn the radio off.
Hell yeah! That one's on my list too. That on my Facebook.
Oh?
That was on my list.
I know there is one song by Real Big Fish that I really love, and I can't think of what it's called.
Probably Beer.
Or
Yeah.
Sell Out.
Yeah. Those are the big hits. Yeah, Real Big Fish is excellent.
Oh.
How about you? 3?
I'm going to go with Pink Floyd, The Wall.
Good.
For
Yep.
I think for a different reason for most people.
No, because that's my 4. So you do well. Not really. My 4 is a different Pink Floyd album. So tell me why it's The Wall.
And well, the reason why is because of my favorite track. My favorite track on The Wall is The Trial. And the reason why is because The Wall was my first encounter with a concept album.
Ah,
In my brain, Up Until the Wall, an album was a random collection of songs with no direct connectivity and no narrative arc. And The Wall was the thing that introduced me to the idea of rock, of an album as opera. Like, here is an album that has individual songs that do work as radio cuts, but you're supposed to sit down and listen to this all the way through in order, and you get told a very specific story with a beginning, middle, and end.
the lack of classical music background, I could see how that, yeah.
Yeah, and so The Trial is a track that absolutely does not work on its own. It's the climactic track that resolves the storyline. And if you haven't listened to the whole album, up to that point, the track is nonsense. You have no idea what's going on. And that was just very powerful to me.
Yeah, that's a pretty good one. The Wall, it's like The Wall and Dark Side are the two, right? That seems to be the two major camps.
Mm-hmm.
I like The Wall a lot. I really love Dark Side. But my favorite Floyd album, my favorite is Umaguma. But my number 4 is actually Echoes, the best of Pink Floyd. Because that's the album that I got my hands on in my teens.
Yeah, I definitely had Echoes got a lot of play.
Right? And that was the only access to Pink Floyd that I had, was this double. The kids today, we call it Get Off My Lawn for a reason, right? A kid today who listens to music on YouTube has no idea what it's like to be cut off from all music at all times. I can call up anything I want on the internet, which is great. But that is not the era we grew up in. You had to go to the store, you had to buy an album, or you could listen to radio or watch MTV. Those were or maybe there were lots of blank tapes, so you would tape things and pass them around. But those were your options. Right now, today, it's wonderful. You have the history of recorded sound at your fingertips. Now, if only I paid better. But we just need people to buy the records. Mine, though, Pink Floyd, the Echoes. And I then proceeded to go buy every single Pink Floyd album that I could. I would go to FYE religiously every week. When I get paid, I'd go buy another one until I had the entire catalog. And I've since stopped. I don't have the ones that have come out since. But, yeah. I went down a deep, dark Pink Floyd rabbit hole. What's yours? Number 4?
It's probably going to be The Who. Tommy.
Tommy's excellent.
Yeah. I got my hands on that when I was 13. My dad had a copy. And, yeah, I spent like an entire summer just listening to that.
Somebody
over and over.
Somebody in my family, either me or in high school, I remember there being a VHS copy of Tommy in the house.
Okay, this isn't the soundtrack, this was the score. This was the one recorded by The Who. So.
Right. That makes sense. Tommy's excellent.
Yes.
That's a good concept album. That's one of the early concept albums. How about you? What's your 4?
So I'm not sure what album to attribute this to, but it was around this time that I discovered Led Zeppelin.
Okay.
And the song that made me discover Led Zeppelin was Kashmir.
Kashmir's excellent.
I had never heard anything like that before, because it just had that particular sound.
Were you listening
I think is still somewhat unique. I was listening to, at the time, they had just done their first round of digital remasters of all their stuff, and there was a lot of publicity surrounding that. And a friend of mine was a huge Zeppelin fan, and he was like, "Man, if you're discovering heavy metal, you need to look at one of the originators of heavy metal. They're not heavy metal; they came before that, but you can clearly see the evolution
Kashmir's
from
pretty
Zeppelin
heavy,
to everything."
Yeah.
And that sent me down a Zeppelin rabbit hole where I sort of immediately absorbed their entire discography, and still think of them as one of my favorite bands.
Where mine's Houses of the Holy.
That's not that. Yeah, that's tremendous. Like Houses of the Holy is like Battle of Evermore.
Yeah.
There's or No Quarter.
Yep, that was the one.
Utterly Righteous.
That was the
songs
one
on there.
No Quarter. It was. It really changed. That's really how I In high school, I listened. So my number 5 is actually "We've Come a What You've Come a Long Way, Baby." Fatboy Slim, and that one really was my first introduction to electronic music. It was either that or Daft Punk Homework, but I put those two together because that was my I had acquired both of those around the same time and was listening to them basically back to back nonstop.
Okay.
I fell in love with electronic music at that point. So that's my I guess that's my 5 and 6. What's your 5 and 6?
My 5 and 6. Well, you keep talking about all these acts that I was exposed to as a kid. So
Yeah.
it's hard to throw the Beatles or the Rolling Stones or
Right,
Led
you just
Zeppelin
grew up with it.
or any of these on my teen list because I'd been listening to them from such a young age that it's like it already had seeped into my psyche at that
Right.
point. So, I feel kind of bad because like my list is like a lot of 90s stuff.
But that's fine.
So
90s stuff is excellent.
90s stuff is excellent,
And by the way, when I look at these lists, right? Because this is the fun is Facebook's posting these, or they're kind of going viral on Facebook. People see somebody doing, they're like, "Oh, I'll make my own list."
yeah,
And so they're kind of getting passed around. I'm seeing them come by, and yeah, it's quite an experience. Yeah, the a lot of 90s. I see mostly 90s.
see, I haven't been,
But that's
I
'cause,
do have older friends.
Yeah,
so.
you have older friends. You can really, it tells a lot about people. So, go ahead.
Okay, so 5 and 6 would be Everclear, So Much for the Afterglow,
Okay.
and Fountains of Wayne. They're self-titled.
I don't like either, but that's fine. It's fine. That fact is why somehow we still are married, because you listen to those in the car when I'm not in it. I love you.
Mm-hmm. I know.
Okay. Steven, 5 and 6.
So Downward Spiral.
Oh, yeah.
That was another one of those wow, music can sound like this moments.
Yeah.
Like had no contact with the industrial or anything like that prior to that. And I still think, even though I love The Fragile to pieces, I still think Downward Spiral is the best thing Trent Reznor has touched. Like there's just that felt like a statement about what music could be that had never quite been before, and I don't think anything else he's done since really achieves that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd probably have to agree with you there.
Though I do love the Social Network soundtrack on another level, but that's a whole different story.
So that's 5. What's 6?
Lateralis by Tool.
Yeah.
Tool was the first band I had heard since Zeppelin that I felt like had the same epic reach with what their songs were about. Like if you listen to Zeppelin's discography, they will take you everywhere. Like Zeppelin wrote songs about so many different topics to a variety that I think puts most artists to shame. And Tool has a similar thing. Like all of their songs were really about something. Like Maynard was the type of guy who has a purpose, and I love most of their work, but I think Lateralis is special. I know people think there are people who swear by the earlier stuff and write off Lateralis, but since it was my first Tool,
Right.
I hadn't had, I couldn't compare it to any of his previous stuff. So whenever I went back to listen to early Tool, even though I liked it, I never liked it as much as that Lateralis. There was a purity to that for me.
That makes sense. My 7 is going to have to be Pat Metheny, New Chautauqua. And that Bitches Brew and Shakti with John McLaughlin. So that's my 7 and 8.
7 and 8, okay.
Those are really the albums that really set me off onto jazz. Right?
Okay.
I was a kid. I wanted to be a singer-songwriter as a teenager. And Dave Matthews, right? Like, that's why it's number 1. I wanted to be a singer-songwriter. And I listened to Dave Matthews, and I started listening to more and more jazz. And I'm fortunate in that I come from an area where jazz is very much ingrained in the culture. New York, right? So you're just around jazz. Where for a lot of people, like I posted my list on Facebook, and my buddy who grew up in Dallas, he's like, "Really, dude? Really? You were listening to all that classic jazz as a teenager?" And I'm like, "Yeah." It didn't even occur to me that it was like, you would just have jazz musicians in the neighborhood.
Yeah.
So it's just a different kind of deal. So those are my 7 and 8. What are your
Okay.
7 and 8?
So, you weren't the only one that had vague aspirations of being a singer-songwriter as a teen. I think that's actually more common than you might think.
Oh yeah, no,
So-
there was a whole bunch of
Oh, yeah.
us.
Yeah.
Oh
So-
God, and we would all go to the open mics and then try to bump naughty bits with each other. Oh, it was so much fun. It was so much fun.
So,
And I had such terrible luck. Anyway,
So, in that vein, my 7 and 8. 7 would be That Dog's Totally Crushed Out.
I don't even know that one.
That Dog was really the first band that I listened to that was mostly female.
Gotcha.
And on top of that, the singer had roughly my vocal range, whereas, you're listening to, Anna Nancy Wilson, or you're listening to Stevie Nicks, or you're listening to, all these female jazz singers that have these incredible ranges, and I'm like, I can't do that. But I could do what she was doing, and I liked that.
You can do it. Everybody can do it. You know you can do it, right?
I've tried. I do not have that range.
You do have that range. You just
And
have
we're
to.
talking the era of like Mariah Carey, and I definitely did not have that range.
Fair enough. All right.
And then so that was what, 7,
7, 8.
and then 8 would be Eve 6
Okay.
for a similar reason. Granted, they weren't female, but they were like a year older than I was,
Gotcha.
and it was like, wait, I could be doing this now. So that was an eye opener for me.
And that one song of theirs, like the Beautiful Oblivion, I know that's not the actual
Yes.
name of the song. That just comes instantly to my head. I don't recall liking much else by them, but I loved that song.
Yeah, this was the album that was on.
All right. You're 7 and 8.
So 7 is really weird. It is the Cherry Poppin' Daddies.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
No. Yeah.
Oh.
Zuzu
Absolutely.
Riot.
Yes.
Love
Yep.
that so much. And I know there's other music like that. For some reason, I don't feel like many other bands can capture whatever they captured on that particular album. They certainly weren't able to do it on any other records. But I love horns so much, and I feel like nice big horn section is so underutilized in modern music. And
Do you know why? It's very expensive. We got Casey coming on soon, right? She'll be on the podcast, but she's going to be on next week's Freeform Fridays. And when I first met her, she's like, "Yeah, I really like that big band sound." I'm like, "Yeah, everybody likes that big band sound. It is literally the most expensive way to make a record, other than hiring a
full
full
orchestra.
orchestra."
right.
So, but yeah, I'm with you. There's something really special about it. I wish that it was the sort of thing where everybody could do it, but the MIDI doesn't do. But like MIDI-fied versions of it don't do it justice. And that's why, like, I always say, make the music that you're gonna make. Make the music that you can make with what you have. So if all you have are cheesy MIDI horns, like, don't try to make high art with it unless you're really making, like,
Or just make something that's gonna sound good with cheesy MIDI horns.
right,
Don't try to make cheesy MIDI horns sound like something they're not.
right, like, own the fact that they're cheesy MIDI horns.
You got a kazoo, write a song for a kazoo.
Right, or bring in a buddy, play, or pick up a horn and learn how to play. Like, I don't know. Right. So,
What was your 8?
that's your 8.
So 8 is the soundtrack to Immortal Beloved, which was the biopic about Beethoven with Gary Oldman as Beethoven.
Oh, yeah.
And this is special because it taught me how much performance matters.
Yeah.
Because I had an album of Beethoven's greatest hits, and it had Ode to Joy, and it had Symphony No. 5, and I had listened to them a lot, and I liked them. And I got this soundtrack, which has the same 2 cuts on it, and it's the same music, but the orchestra performing it on the Immortal Beloved soundtrack
Is crushing.
takes it from. I mean, it's you can't even put it into words. You listen to their Symphony Number 5 back to back, the 2 recordings, and it's like someone. It's like the difference between someone being marched down a road at gunpoint versus someone sprinting out of sheer joy, and it was incredible to me.
Right, and yeah, that just goes to show the difference in symphonies and conductors.
Right. Yeah, and just like so many different human factors that have nothing to do with the notes on the page that made that music come to life.
Right.
In one version and was just sort of inert and there in the other.
Gotcha. Yep, I agree. All right, so my 9 and 10. Probably Weird Al Yankovic, Bad Hair Day.
Okay. Did that come out while you were a teen?
I got it in 7th grade.
Oh, jeez. I'm feeling old now.
And I love the snot out of every cut of that book.
Me too. That was a big one in those years. I loved.
Yeah.
Amish Paradise got a lot of play.
Mm-hmm.
And then my number 10 will be Somewhere in Time, Iron Maiden. In 8th grade. In 8th grade, my band director, Mr. Eugene Randolph, who's no longer with us, and he arranged Somewhere in Time for middle school band. Right? Right? Have the flutes do it, and then have the brass do it. It was very fun. And I think he gave me a tape of it to listen to, and I listened to it till that tape wore out. And then I later bought a CD of it, and then listened to it until the laser burned through the... Not really, I think it got scratched, but you know what I mean. I really loved the snot out of this album. So, yeah. Somewhere in Time.
I think that's one of their best tracks, like the title track from Somewhere in Time.
Oh, yeah.
Really solid.
There's a lot of that whole album's good though. Like, everything Iron Maiden does is just perfect to me. So.
And you've set me up well for my 9th album.
Fair enough. And what are your 9 and 10?
My 9 and 10 are actually 2 local artists, because in my teens I was getting really interested in my local Sacramento scene. So the first one is the Max Wanky Trio, Slingshot, which I think that's really the first time that I realized that you didn't need much to really groove. Because, it's literally drums, guitar, and an upright bass. And, you get the combination of guitar, drums, bass, and pretty much everything. And this one, they didn't need more than that.
Kind of like the Jazz Destroyers.
Yeah, they found some very, very deep pockets.
Sure.
And it was just absolutely astounding to me. I would literally track them down in like record stores and just sit and watch them play for hours. I'm fairly certain that at least one of them thought I was a stalker, but
You might have been.
I might have been, but
Might have been. So that's your 9.
That's
What's your
9. 10 would be Death Ray self-titled.
Fair enough.
And the reason it comes at the end of my list would be I discovered it it came out at the end of my teens. It came out when I was 19.
Oh, see, a lot of the music I was listening to at like 18, 19 was far... Like, I tried to put a lot of my early teen stuff in there, but really the big impacts for me were like 17, 18, 19.
See, most of the really big impacts for me were prior to puberty. So
you know what I think it is? It's because your dad had had a ridiculous music collection.
And so
I did not grow up with much music around
that. That didn't impact me during my teens because it had already impacted me.
Yeah.
So
what we'll do next week? Next week, what we'll do is we'll do the 10 albums from our childhood.
Okay.
Right. So that's how we'll do that.
Okay. So yeah. So Death Ray was a big one, and at the same, it was the first time I'd ever seen a band that the song stuck with me 4 months later
Yep.
after singing them once.
Yep.
So, yeah, that was pretty special for me.
Gotcha. Steven, what's your 9? You said I
So-
set you up with Somewhere in Time.
So 9 is King in Crimson.
Oh, yeah.
Which is Bruce Dickinson's first solo album after he left Iron Maiden. And I got this album delivered to me by accident. Like, I had ordered something and they just purely mixed it up. They sent me the wrong CD. But I opened it up and I really loved the album cover, and the song list was like, these are really metal sounding names. I'm totally going to give this a whirl instead of sending it back. And the first track, it was just like, I freaking love this. This guy has an amazing voice. And it's just all, like, you know, it's the cheesy metal where it's all songs about crazy, like, you know, the cliche metal content, right? But man,
Wait, were they
knocked
fighting
it.
dragons?
Yeah, totally. Dragon
Okay.
fighting. Yeah, exactly.
You know who the best dragon fighters in the history of music are, though? Toto. Go listen to the deep cuts of Toto. They fight dragons. So keep going.
Right. And I had not actually heard any Iron Maiden at the time.
Yeah.
I was aware of them on a vague level. I think I'd
By name.
maybe heard a Cut a Run to the Hills without really knowing who it was. But after listening to that album from Brucey, I was like, I need to hear everything else he's done, and I went backwards into Maiden, and I love a lot of their stuff. But there's something really magical about some of those tracks on King and Crimson. I think you really knocked it out. No, wait, I'm sorry. That's the name of the first track. The album is called The Chemical Wedding.
Ah, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the album is The Chemical Wedding. The first track on it is King and Crimson. That was the first song I heard, so that's what stuck with me. But the album is The Chemical Wedding.
Now, remind me, Bruce Dickinson, I think he was out of Maiden by the time that they did Somewhere in Time. That's probably why I don't have as much affinity. Like, I love everything Maiden does, but I have no special affinity for Bruce Dickinson. They have a rolling cast of people that come through.
I could have sworn Dickinson was on that, but that could also be
It might have
because
been
I
when he
have a
came back.
greatest hits album where he re-recorded some of their stuff from the previous guy. So maybe that's it.
That could be it. I don't know. Leave it. Correct me in the comments. So then you're number 10?
So I have to cheat a little bit because since I'm just coming up with these off the top of my head, I've kind of run out of albums I can remember from my actual teenage years. And this one comes a little bit later, but it's Blind Guardian's A Night at the Opera. And the reason I think it counts is because this album is the apex of all of the musical tastes I developed during my teenage years. Like,
Fair enough.
Okay.
once I had gone down the orchestral track and the heavy metal track and the classic rock track, for me, all of those things lead to this sort of sublime apotheosis in the form of A Night at the Opera, which is just, Blind Guardian's a German heavy metal band who look very much like the 80s never ended. But they have these incredible voices. Like, the guy is classically trained, and they sound like a church choir.
Ah.
But it's hard. But it's pretty serious metal, and it has a lot of orchestral backing, and it's just fantastic to me.
That's awesome. So that's our top. That's our 10 albums from our teens.
Yep.
Ready for the lap? Here we go. Lap.